Paradise Found by William Warren, The Cradle of the Human Race at the North Pole. Diagram illustrating the true key to ancient cosmology and mythical geography. Compare page 479. The northern celestial pole in the zenith. AB, the axis of the heavens in perpendicular position. The axis of the earth in perpendicular position. The abode of the supreme god or gods. Europe, Asia, and the known portion of Africa. The earth surrounding the equatorial ocean river. And the abode of disembodied human souls. The abode of demons. The location of submerged Eden. The strength of the hill of Sion. Paradise Found, The Cradle of the Human Race at the North Pole. A Study of the Prehistoric World by William R. Warren, President of Boston University, corporate member of the American Oriental Society, author of many books. This book is not the work of a dreamer. It is a thoroughly serious and sincere attempt to present what is, to the author's mind, the true and final solution of one of the greatest and most fascinating of all problems connected with the history of mankind. That this true solution has not been furnished before is not strange. The suggestion that primitive Eden was at the Arctic Pole seems at first sight the most incredible of all wild and willful paradoxes, and it is only within the lifetime of our own generation that the progress of geological discovery has relieved the hypothesis of fatal antecedent improbability. Moreover, when one considers the enormous variety and breadth of the fields from which its evidences of truth must be derived, when one remembers how recent are those comparative sciences on whose results the argument must chiefly depend, when one observes that many of the most striking of our alleged proofs, both in the physical and in the anthropological domain, are precisely the latest of the conclusions of these most modern of all sciences, it is easy to see that a generation ago the demonstration here attempted could not have been given. Even 5 years ago, some of the most interesting and cogent of our arguments would as yet have been lacking. The interest which has so long invested our problem, and which has prompted so many attempts to solve it, was never greater than today. The lapse of centuries has rendered many other questions antiquated, but not this. On the contrary, the more the modern world has advanced in new knowledge, the more exigent has grown the necessity of finding a valid solution. Men are feeling as never before that until the starting point of human history can be determined, the historian, the archaeologist, and the paleontological anthropologist are all working in the dark. It is seen that without this desideratum, the ethnologist, the philologist, the mythographer, the theologian, the sociologist, can none of them construct anything not liable to profound modification, if not to utter overthrow, the moment any new light shall be thrown upon the mother region and the prehistoric movement of the human race. Every anthropological science, therefore, and every science related to anthropology, seems at the present moment to be standing in a state of dubitant expectancy, willing to work little tentatively but conscious of its destitution of the needful primal datum, and conscious of its consequential lack of a valid structural law. To the believer in revelation, or even in the most ancient and venerable ethnic traditions, the volume here presented will be found to possess uncommon interest. For many years the public mind has been schooled in a narrow naturalism, which has in its worldview as little room for the extraordinary as it has for the supernatural. Decade after decade, the representatives of this teaching have been measuring the natural phenomena of every age and of every place by the petty measuring rod of their own local and temporary experience. So long and so successfully have they dogmatized on the constancy of nature's laws and the uniformity of nature's forces, that of late it has required no small degree of courage to enable an intelligent man to stand up in the face of his generation and avow his personal faith in the early existence of men of gigantic stature and of almost millenarian longevity. Especially have clergymen and Christian teachers and writers upon biblical history been embarrassed by the popular incredulity on these subjects, and not infrequently by a consciousness that this incredulity was in some measure shared by themselves. To all such, and indeed to all the broader-minded among the naturalists themselves, a new philosophy of primeval history, a philosophy which for the alleged extraordinary effects provides the adequate extraordinary causes, cannot fail to prove most welcome. The execution of the plan of the book is by no means all that the author could desire. To the elaboration of so vast an argument, the materials for which must be gleaned from every possible field of knowledge, the broadest and profoundest scholar might well devote the undistracted labor of a lifetime. To the writer loaded with the cares of a laborious executive office, there were lacking both the leisure and the equipment otherwise attainable for so high a task. The best he could do was to turn 1 or 2 summer vacations into work time and give the result to the world. Of the correctness of his position he has no doubt, and of the preparedness of the scientific world to accept it he is also confident. To the foregoing remarks it may be proper to add that apart from its immediate purpose, the book has interest, and it is hoped value, as a contribution to the infant science of comparative mythology. By the application of the author's true key to an ancient cosmology and mythical geography, it has been possible to adjust and interpret a great variety of ancient cosmological and geographical notions never before understood by modern scholars. For example, the origin and significance of the Chinvat Bridge are here for the first time explained. The indication of the polocentric character common to the mythical systems of sacred geography among all ancient peoples will probably be new to every reader. The new light thrown upon such questions as those relating to the direction of the sacred quarter, the location of the abode of the dead, the character and position of the cosmical tree, the course of the backward flowing ocean river, the correlation of the navels of earth and heaven, not to enumerate other points, can hardly fail to attract the lively attention of all students and teachers of ancient mythology and mythical geography. To teachers of Homer, the fresh contributions toward a right understanding of Homeric cosmology are sure to prove of value, and if in the end, the work may only lead to a systematic and intelligent teaching of the long-neglected but most important science of ancient cosmology and mythical geography in all reputable universities and classical schools, it will surely not have been written in vain. That the author has escaped all errors and oversights while ranging through so numerous and such diverse fields of investigation, many of which are but just open to the pioneering specialist, is too much to expect. He only asks that any such blemishes which a more competent scholarship may detect, or which the progress of new learning may yet bring to light, may not be allowed to prejudice the force of true arguments, but may be pointed out in the spirit of a candid and helpful criticism. In conclusion, the author respectfully commits his work for all truth-seeking spirits, not less to the patient investigators of nature than to the student of history, of literature, and of religion. Particularly would he commend it to all those yearning and waiting Königssonen, whose experience has been described by Hans Andersen in the words, "Once upon a time there was a king, a son. Nobody had so many and such beautiful books as he. In these all that had ever happened in the world he could read and see depicted in splendid engravings. Of every people and of every land could he get information. But as to where the Garden of Eden was, not a word was to be found therein. Just this it was, on which he meditated most of all." First part, the location of Eden, state of the question. Chapter 1, the results of explorers historic and legendary. Columbus approaching the gate. The reports of Sir John de Mandeville. Adventures of Prince Yarek Yeo. The voyages of St. Brandon and of Ogre. The success of the author of the Book of Enoch. And an equestrian's anticipations. David Livingstone, a searcher for Eden. Unanimous verdict, non est inventus. Chapter 2, the results of theologians. Ideas of the Church Fathers. Opinions of Luther and Calvin. Part first, the first part. Location of Eden, state of the question. Chapter 1, results of the explorers, historic and legendary. Results of the theologians, Part 2. And Part 3, the results of non-theological scholars, naturalists, ethnologists, archaeologists, etc. You shall understand that no mortal may approach to that paradise, for by land no man may go, for wild beasts that are in the deserts, and for the high mountains and great huge rocks that no man may pass by, for the dark places that are there, and by the rivers may no man go. For the water runs so roughly and so sharply, because it comes down so outrageously from the high places above, that it runs in so great waves that no ship may row or sail against it. And the waters roar so, and make so huge a noise, and so great a tempest, that no man may hear another in the ship, though he cried with all the might he could. Many great lords have essayed with great will many times to pass by those rivers towards paradise, with full great companies, but they might not speed in their voyage, and many died for weariness of rowing against the strong waves, and many of them became blind and many deaf from the noise of the water, and some perished and were lost in the waves, so that no mortal man may approach to that place without the special grace of God. Sir John de Mandeville, or Mandeville. Chapter 1. The Results of Explorers, Historic and Legendary. One of the most interesting and pathetic sages to be found in all literature is that in which Christopher Columbus announces to his royal patrons his supposed discovery of the ascent to the gate of the long-lost Garden of Eden. With what emotions must his heart have thrilled, as steering up this ascent he felt his ship smoothly rising toward the sky, the weather becoming milder as he rose, to be so near the paradise of God's own planting, to be the first discoverer of the way in which the believing world could at length, after so many ages, once more approach its sacred precincts, even if forbidden to enter. What an exquisite experience it must have been to the lonely spirit of that great explorer. It is his third voyage. He is in the Gulf of Paria, or Paria, to the north or northwest of the mouth of the Orinoco. In his loyal epistle to Ferdinand and Isabella, thus he writes, "The Holy Scriptures record that our Lord made the earthly paradise and planted in it the tree of life. And thence springs a fountain from which the four principal rivers of the world take their source, namely the Ganges in India, the Tigris and Euphrates, and the Nile. I do not find, nor ever have found, any account by the Romans or Greeks, which fixes in a positive manner the site of the terrestrial paradise. Neither have I seen it given in any map monde, laid down from authentic sources. Some place it in Ethiopia, at the sources of the Nile, but others, traversing all these countries, found neither the temperature nor the altitude of the sun correspond with their ideas respecting it, nor did it appear that the overwhelming waters of the deluge had been there. Some pagans pretended to adduce arguments to establish that it was in the Fortunate Islands, now called the Canaries. St. Isidore, Bede, and Strabo 1, and the master of scholastic history 2, and all the learned theologians agree that the earthly paradise is in the east. I have already described my ideas concerning this hemisphere and its form, and I have no doubt if I could pass below the equinoctial line after reaching the highest point of which I have spoken, I should find a much milder temperature and a variation in the stars and in the water. Not that I suppose that elevated point to be navigable, nor even that there is water there. Indeed, I believe it is impossible to ascend thither, because I am convinced that it is the spot of the earthly paradise, whither no one can go but by God's permission. But this land which your Highness have now sent me to explore is very extensive, and I think there are many other countries in the south, of which the world has never had any knowledge. I do not suppose that the earthly paradise is in the form of a rugged mountain, as the descriptions of it have made it appear, but that it is on the summit of the spot, which I have described as being in the form of the stalk or stem of a pear. I do not suppose that the earthly paradise is in the form of a rugged mountain as the descriptions of it have made it appear, but that it is on the summit of the spot which I have described as being in the form of the stalk or stem end of a pear. The approach to it from a distance must be by a constant and a gradual ascent, but I believe that, as I have already said, no one could ever reach the top. I think also that the water I have described may proceed from it, though it may be far off, and that stopping at that place I have just left, it forms this lake. There are great indications of this being the terrestrial paradise, for its situation coincides with the opinions of the holy and wise theologians whom I have mentioned, and moreover the other evidences agree with the supposition, for I have never either read or heard of fresh water coming in so large a quantity in close conjunction with the water of the sea. The idea is also corroborated by the blandness of the temperature, and if the water of which I speak does not proceed from the earthly paradise, it seems to be a still greater wonder, for I do not believe that there is any river in the world so large and deep. When I left the Dragon's Mouth, which is the northernmost of the two straits which I have described, and which I so named on the day of Our Lady of August 1, I found that the sea ran so strongly to the westward that between the hour of Mass 2. When I weighed anchor, and the hour of complines, 81 made 65 leagues of 4 miles each, and not only was the wind not violent, but on the contrary very gentle, which confirmed me in the conclusion that in sailing southward there is a continuous ascent, while there is a corresponding descent towards the north. I hold it for certain that the waters of the sea move from east to west with the sky, and that in passing this track they hold a more rapid course, and have thus eaten away large tracts of land, and hence has resulted this great number of islands. Indeed, these islands themselves afford an additional proof of it, for on the one hand all those which lie west and east, or a little more obliquely northwest and southeast, are broad, while those which lie north and south, or northeast and southwest, that is, in a directly contrary direction to the said winds, are narrow. Furthermore, that these islands should possess the most costly productions is to be accounted for by the mild temperature, which comes to them from heaven, since these are the most elevated parts of the world. It is true that in some parts the waters do not appear to take this course, but this only occurs in certain spots where they are obstructed by land, and hence they appear to take different directions. I now return to my subject of the land of Gracia, and of the river and lake found there, which latter might more be properly called a sea, for a lake is but a small expanse of water which, when it becomes great, deserves the name of a sea, just as we speak of the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea. And I think that if the river mentioned does not proceed from the terrestrial paradise, it comes from an immense tract of land situated in the south.